obviously in this period, very profound changes in our national security. A lot of that, of course, is centered around a more intense challenge that we face on our northern borders with China. I spoke to you about the changes in governance. Let me also say that there have been, obviously in this period, very profound changes in our national security. And a lot of that, of course, is centered around a more intense challenge that we face on our northern borders with China. I think most of you would be familiar with that. We continue to have, of course, the problem about cross-border terrorism with Pakistan. But if there is one border and one region which has dramatically improved in the last decade, it is actually eastern and northeastern India. And the reason for that is because we have actually vastly improved our relationship with Bangladesh. We have settled our land boundary agreement with that country. And really, that is an example of where diplomacy, successful diplomacy, has directly contributed. And a lot of that, of course, is centered around a more intense challenge that we face on our northern borders with China. I think most of you would be familiar with that. We continue to have, of course, the problem about cross-border terrorism with Pakistan. But if there is one border and one region which has dramatically improved in the last decade, it is actually eastern and northeastern India. And the reason for that is because we have actually vastly improved our relationship with Bangladesh. We have settled our land boundary agreement with that country. And really, that is an example of where diplomacy, successful diplomacy, has directly contributed to stronger national security. But having said that, I also would like all of you to understand, for a big country like India, it is not enough that we deal with challenge number one, challenge number two, a terrorist here or a military maneuver there. We have to create a model for ourselves which makes us a stronger nation. Because it's a very competitive world. It is a world where everybody at the end of the day is competing. I'm not saying people are necessarily against you, but they will compete with you. And in that world, what we saw during COVID, what we are still seeing today, because of the knock-on effects of the Ukraine conflict, is unless we become more self-reliant, unless we manufacture more things in India, unless the core requirements of India are met within India, we will remain vulnerable to outside pressures. This is a very, very sharp realization in the last 3 years. Now, there have been people who told us, India is not good for manufacturing, maybe you should stick to services, that's better for you. A country like India can't do that. That for us to be dependent on somebody else for manufacturing is too much of a societal risk, too much of an economic risk, and most of all, too much of a national security risk. So our effort today, and many of you would be familiar with this term, Atmanirbhar Bharat. Atmanirbhar Bharat is not going back to the pre-1992, pre-reform era. Atmanirbhar Bharat is actually realizing today, after 1992, that we have opened up to the world. But we should not let subsidized goods, non-competitive, people who do not play fair by market rules, to actually come into our economy and impact our producers. We have a duty also to our businesses, to our manufacturers, most of all to our workers. India will not progress unless that progress is reflected in employment. And we have to create that deep strengths and those supply chains within India, and that too is a transformation is taking place today. I mean, those of you who have any economic interest will see, and this is in fact one of my primary messages to the Austrian government, that please ask your companies today to come to India and look at investing in India and manufacturing in India, because that is the way you're going to get access to my market. Because at the end of the day, other companies, other countries, they want access to our market. That's our trump card. Access to our market must come with benefits to us. It is not something that should be given away thoughtlessly. We are not a country who should be part of other people's marketing plan. So this change today, that how do we make India more competitive, how do we build deeper strengths in India, this today is a very big change which is taking place, as I said, under Atmanirbhar Bharat. We've also, from last month, taken over the presidency of the G20. Again, many of you would have read about it. I sometimes get the question, you can imagine from which quarters, saying, well, it was bound to come your way anyway, so what's the big deal? It is a very big deal. It is a very big deal because in our diplomatic history, we have never had this many powerful nations, the top 20 economies of the world, who among them today account for the bulk of the global GDP, who dominate world trade, who are 2/3 of the world's population. Their leaders come to India. That itself is important. But more than who is coming, it is when are they coming? Because as you would have gathered from my remarks by now, this is a very difficult and challenging time for the world. It is a difficult time because the world is under great economic stress, under supply chain stress. There is very strong political polarization. Even to get all the major countries to sit around the table itself requires a lot of diplomacy. So for us to take up this responsibility at this time is something truly exceptional, and I can tell you that we intend to use our presidency obviously for the benefit of the international community. We have a lot of ideas and thoughts, but in all of this, we also want to be a voice of fairness, of justice, of ensuring that societies and countries who would otherwise get left behind, who do not have somebody else to speak for them, that we emerge as their voice on matters like energy access and food security. But G20 is also an occasion where you will see in your TV channels, in your social media, in the newspapers that you read in Austria, you will see that we will take it as an opportunity to present India and all the changes that I have tried to describe to you, to the people of the world. So this G20 presidency is not as would normally be done. It's not something which is just going to be done in the capital city or even in 2 or 3, Mumbai, Calcutta, Chennai metropolises. We are going to take it across the country to more than 55 cities. We are going to make sure that the diversity of India, every region, every culture, every I would say local cuisine, local products, they will be on display to the world. That the delegates of G20, because there will really be tens of thousands of G20 officials and leaders who will be coming to India during this period, that they have an opportunity really to see the length and breadth of India. So in a sense, I would say you can think of it as a marketing of India to the world. I hope that in your own way you will follow it, you will encourage it, and in whatever way you can actually tell your acquaintances about what is happening in India or which particular part of India G20 meeting is happening. That is something which would be very much appreciated by us. So having having said that, let me come to my, not punchline, but my main message.